Here to resume our luncheon session is once again Conference Chair Lloyd Kirk.
Hello, everyone. I trust everyone's lunch has gone well. Our luncheon program is sponsored by Tulsa Industrial Authority, and we appreciate that sponsorship. Today, we have two speakers that will be speaking. The luncheon program begins with the Vice President of Development Services at EFG Brownfield Partners, who manages real estate and financing components of brownfield and infill projects. He brings a hand-on understanding of how successful public-private partnerships are structured and financed. Welcome, Cameron Bertrand.
Thank you very much. I think if I had known that my head was going to be made 3 feet tall, I might have paid more attention to this picture I turned in. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. My company, Brownfield Partners, has had the privilege of working with the city of Tulsa on the implementation of an EPA area-wide planning grant, and that's what brings us to Oklahoma. I myself am from Denver, Colorado. It's a city much like Oklahoma City and Tulsa that has been very aggressively investing in itself and investing in brownfield properties. In Denver, we have spent a lot of the last 5 to 10 years investing in public transportation. We have light rail and we have commuter rail. But I live near downtown, and I'm sort of old school. I tend to ride the bus. And so on my way to work yesterday, before we came out to the conference, I was on the bus, and a woman got on the bus, and she had her baby with her, and she was all dressed up to go to work, and she had one of those contraptions where the baby can look out and see the world. And as she climbed up on the bus and put her money in, the bus driver sort of looked up and said, "Man, that is an ugly baby." It's a Brownfield conference, got to tell an ugly baby joke. And so the woman was sort of taken aback by this, and she said, "Excuse me?" And the bus driver said, "Well, I'm not being judgmental. I just, in my line of work, I see a lot of babies, and that's an ugly one." And so the woman was very upset, and she was sort of flustered, and she went back to her seat, and she started to sit down, and the man in the seat next to her could tell she was upset, and he said, "Can I help you? Are you all right? You seem really upset." And the woman said, "Well, I just don't think I've ever been treated so rudely in my whole life. You can't believe what the bus driver just said to me." And so the man said, "Well, you don't have to take that. You should go right back up there, and you should tell him that he can't speak to you that way." And she said, "Well, do you think you really think I should?" And he said, "I think you should. I think you should do it right now. You go up there right now, and you tell that man, give him a piece of your mind. Here, let me hold your monkey." So I tell that joke. I feel like every Brownfield conference needs an ugly baby joke. And I tell it in part because I think the adage that we've been taught as kids is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I think sometimes we're just being polite. When you're in the brownfield business, sometimes it's ugliness that's in the eye of the beholder, trying to figure out, and cities and towns that are trying to do the right thing by these underutilized, contaminated sites are a little bit like that mom traveling around town with her baby and trying to convince the bus drivers of the world to see past it and find the opportunity that's underneath. And so our work with Tulsa has been great. If you're familiar with the EPA area-wide planning grant, it's the opportunity to pick an area of your town and really study it, to identify those opportunity sites, and not only to identify them, but to begin to figure out how to position them for reinvestment and redevelopment. And a lot of times what we're talking about is how to initiate public-private partnerships from the public side, from the city side. And we talk about public-private partnerships. I'm going to watch my clock here. We talk about public-private partnerships sometimes like they're a new thing, like they're a new concept. But really, when you talk about the built environment, The built environment has always been a cooperative effort between the public sector and the private sector. And those roles, if you look at it, and we tend to talk about the public sector like one thing, but really the public sector is two things. It's the government side, but the government also becomes the vehicle through which the community has a say and a stake in the outcomes. And the private sector isn't really just one monolithic thing. There's the development community, but more importantly, there's the capital side, which has to sort of bless every individual development to make it happen. You're oftentimes talking to the developer, but behind the developer are the investors who make it possible. And that traditional, that traditional role that we're used to is the role where the developer is the initiator. They're the visionary, and they're looking at a specific site that they want to develop, and they're coming in, they're motivated by profit, they're motivated by the market and placemaking, and the role of the city and the other government officials is really to take a step back and look at that bigger vision and to be the protector, if you will, of the long-term view, to make sure that the sidewalks are safe and meet up with the other sidewalks, so that the capacity in the sewer systems are there, that there's schools to handle those developments, and that there's a place for homeless people and all the homeless beds aren't in the same part of town. It's that equity view. And then the capital markets are there overseeing both, and they're saying, is this individual investment a good one? Is it a right one? And if they say yes, and they take that both near-term and long-term view, then the project gets done. That's the normal way that development happens, and that's an engagement that we're all used to. What's different in a brownfield situation is that the city has to put on a different hat. And the city has to say, shop around and say, hey, development community, come look at our sites, come look at our opportunities, come see what we've got. It's not, there is an opportunity here. And the hat sort of shifts. And what I wanted to do today was just talk about how the city and the public behaves a little bit differently as it puts on this hat that says, come invest in my town. This particular picture is a picture of a shopping center. This one's in Denver, but it could be in any town. It is a late 50s era shopping center. It was right after automotive-oriented shopping really took hold, and we were smart enough to know that we needed bigger sites and we needed big parking lots, but we hadn't quite figured out that we needed to put them on arterials yet. So this particular site was very successful for 10 or 20 years, and then it wasn't. When it came time to figure out what it might be, it was discovered that there was a fairly significant landfill underneath it. That was not an uncommon thing to build a neighborhood in around it. And then put the commercial piece right up on top. So visions of residential infill development were quickly quashed on this particular site. So when we talk about what's different, I'd like to walk through a couple of things. And I think the first one is that brownfield sites are in communities, almost always. You're looking at the second, if not third round of development. If you look at this particular site, you see that it's totally built in around it, and it's largely residential. And so when you are going to put community dollars into, and public dollars and tax dollars into a development, and when public officials are going to be standing up at the podium inviting others, in to make something happen here, really bring the development community in, what you have is you have a higher standard for community input, and that cuts both ways. You will need the community every step along the way, but it's also true that you run the risk of what is sometimes known as sort of death by good intention, right? So that we're all for brownfield redevelopment, we're all for affordable housing, we're all for sustainable development, we're all for the engagement of disadvantaged businesses, but if every goal that every community member brings to the table is going to be lumped onto the site, chances are this project that was already economically upside down is just going to get further so. So the public has the job of weighing out and having that back and forth conversation and making sure that the education piece comes through. The second thing that happens for the public is once they step in and you identify these brownfield sites and you say, let's try to do something about it, you've sort of bought the problem. You didn't break it, but you own the problem. And the problem is real. These brownfield sites, this is that same shopping center, and you see how over time, through lack of investment, they become genuinely and truly blighted, and that has a negative impact on the property around it. Once you sign up to do this, the public, unlike the private sector, really can't walk away. This shopping center here was a shopping center that was first identified for redevelopment in 2001. That deal fell apart. A deal was put back together in 2004. That deal fell apart. And then in 2005, the city of Denver finally stepped up and said, let's buy it. And so they actually bought the site in order to affect its abatement, remediation, and redevelopment. And so in this case, they truly did end up owning the problem. But the idea there is clear that once you make a commitment to the community to turn around a blighted, negative, property in your community, the local government is really going to be the driving force, and they're going to be at the table until they see it done. One more picture of blight. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I think the second piece of it is it's a brownfield. This is a picture of the same site as it was being remediated. And so at the beginning of the conversation with the community, everybody was happy to see the city come in and finally do something about it. They were excited to make visionary plans and talk about what else the site might be. But about 18 months into the project, when 100 trucks a day are taking municipal waste down a neighborhood street and bringing back in clean dirt, the conversation looks a little bit different. And again, the standard for public participation, I think, is higher still. In this particular case, I remember it well, the council person, and I'm sure you all have this council person in your town, when people would call up her office and complain about the amount of truck traffic or the noise or the various things that were going on, she would put them on hold, conference me in, bring them back on the phone, and then proceed to chew me out for their benefit via conference call at any time of day. And so I never did resolve the issue for anybody, but everybody felt a little bit better having a chance to yell at it. But I say this because at the end of the day, these are big projects. They're big projects in the middle of the city, and again, the city answers to a higher standard. I think another component that makes it different is the financing. I don't plan to walk through this slide. I'd like to leave a little time for Mayor Bartlett. But I put it up here just to show how complicated the financing can be. What you see up there is 7 different sources of funds, each with their own set of reporting requirements to different government and private entities. And each trying to make a different thing happen. And you'll also see some loops there. I think we've heard some people talk today about spending money and then getting it back and spending it and spending it again. The other thing that's happening up there is that the public sector and the private sector are both dependent on the success of the real estate deal in order to get paid back and be made whole. And I think that that's something that we forget about, that when we enter into a public-private partnership, the public now has a financial stake in the deal being successful, and that's a very good thing, I think, in terms of all of us keeping our eyes on the prize. But the other thing is that you're now the regulating agency overseeing this project, and people get very nervous, and suddenly a community that used to think of the local jurisdiction as the body that works with them to make sure that when developers are change agents in their community that they're getting a fair shake, suddenly the city looks like the developer to them, and they're not sure who's left to make sure that the local community is getting a fair shake. And so again, it's that layering in early communication with the community and building that trust, educating them along the way. We talk a lot about transparency. You could spend all day trying to explain this graph to a community group, and it wouldn't feel a lick more transparent than it did, at 5 o'clock than it did at 8 o'clock. There's simply no way at some times to make clear to people exactly what's going on, and that complexity is part of it. The second thing I think, and this is a picture of this site today, and this is sort of the other thing that I think is interesting about brownfield redevelopment, especially in some of the areas where the area-wide planning grants are being used, we have multiple overlapping goals, and one of them is economic development and community revitalization, especially in low and moderate income areas. We tend to think of the brownfields monies that EPA and HUD and others make available to us as leveling the playing field. These are properties that are disadvantaged, they're hamstrung, if you will, by the environmental taint, the contamination, they're hard to lend on. And so it's not surprising that other areas get redeveloped while these areas don't. So you use those public monies to bring them up to a level playing field, but what happens when the playing field that you've brought them level with was never that competitive to start with, right? If the community is a low to moderate income community, if it's economically challenged, there's not a lot of demand for housing or retail development there in the first place, great. I got a grant to make my property clean, and now it's a level playing field, but there's still no market-based demand for what I've delivered. So yet another round of public funding is sometimes necessary in order to see actual development happen, to get the bang for your buck of that original investment. And that's why oftentimes in brownfield deals, it's not enough just to talk about what EPA can do, but you find yourself talking to historic preservation, you find yourself talking to housing and urban development, you find yourself talking to state and local housing authorities. In this case, the first project to come out of the ground was a community health center. The other thing I would say is if you're going to do this, I wouldn't bring it to market in fall of 2008, which is what we did. And so it took a little bit longer than we thought to pull it together, but one of the early ones was this public health center. The second thing that was able to come out of the ground was a tax credit supported senior development. This was a neighborhood where there were a lot of seniors aging in place in ranch style and single family houses. They didn't want to leave the neighborhood, but they did want to leave their house. This was a project when everybody said there was no market in 2009 and 2010. It had a waiting list longer than the number of rooms in it when it opened. The second phase is eminently under construction, but if you can figure out the financing, then you can pull together these projects. So with that, I guess I would just finish with this thought of, why it is that the public steps into these spaces and what the benefits are. And I think we've seen and heard bits of this conversation in the breakout sessions and in the speeches that have come before. But the public steps into the role of being a partner in a financial way because there's an opportunity that's presented to either, as I like to say, address a market failure where there's simply a mismatch. Once upon a time, it made sense to have a rubber plant in the middle of the town or an industrial piece on the edge of downtown. That time has come and gone, and now it just sits there, and the environmental contamination keeps it from moving forward. In other places, it can be a market catalyst, right? It's a part of town where the brownfield grant or addressing the brownfield property can kick off an area of your town where you believe there's an opportunity, but the opportunity hasn't come yet. It's sort of a catalyst. And then finally, you can make it better because you are teaming up with the various other funders. You can bring affordable housing where there wasn't, senior housing where it's needed, parks and other amenities. So in English, it's make it happen at all, make it happen sooner, or make it happen better than it otherwise would have happened. And if you're doing those things well, then you're going to see jobs and investment, and therefore positive fiscal impact that's either being created because but for the investment it didn't exist at all, it's coming sooner than it otherwise would have come, or more of it's coming because it's better. And that, I think, is why towns like Oklahoma City and towns like Tulsa have taken the effort to step up and say, I want to be one of those towns where we're actively going after private sector partners who want to engage with us to make these kinds of projects happen. And so with that, it's been a real privilege for me to work in the city of Tulsa, and I look forward to more of it. And with that, I'm going to step off the stage, and I think Lloyd is going to introduce Mayor Bartlett.
Cameron, thank you so much and for sharing your expertise in public-private partnerships. Before I introduce the mayor, he wanted me to show a short video. I think it's like 5 minutes before I introduce him. So let's show the video.
Welcome to the former oil capital of the world, now energy capital of the world, the city of Tulsa. From where you sit at City Hall, you're surrounded by history and new beginnings. The Performing Arts Center is just across the street. The BOK Center is a few blocks away. And around many corners, you can see strong historic buildings and new developments taking shape.
We just are kind of persistent here in Tulsa.
Julius Pegues is a lifelong Tulsan who knows its history and participates in its revitalization.
This planning process to redevelop the area in and near downtown Tulsa, started a long time ago.
New restaurants are opening, the college campuses are thriving, and there's hope that the next phase of progress will happen at the sites that have been labeled Brownfields. City leaders have been working to address 3 specific brownfields areas for many years. The former Evans Fin Tube manufacturing site, the old Morton Healthcare Center, and the old Dover Norris Sucker Rod plant, now occupied by Story Record Company. Trespassers have made their mark on the old Evans Fin Tube building over the years, but city leaders still see its potential. It sits in the historic Greenwood district.
It is an excellent location as a mixed-use development site with a wonderful view of downtown Tulsa.
Working in Neighborhoods Director Dwayne Majette is also a lifelong Tulsan who remembers when the area thrived.
Our community, the residents in the area as well as the larger community is actively engaged in seeing this redevelopment occur.
That Greenwood community dedication goes back a long way, even before statehood, where neighborhoods were built by hand and the homes filled up with African American doctors, lawyers, realtors, and newspaper publishers. Greenwood Avenue would become known as Black Wall Street, where sadly the success would go up in smoke.
A lot of things got burned to the ground. That is just a shame.
Tulsa historian and photographer Jerry Cornelius says there are many theories about what started the Tulsa race riots on June 1st, 1921.
It had to do with a shoe shine guy in downtown that a white woman elevator operator claimed he molested her. Well, as it proved later, he didn't, and the whole thing was one big hoax.
No one knows for sure how many people died that day because documentation of the event was suppressed. Some later reports estimate anywhere from 35 to 300 deaths. More than 1,000 homes and businesses were destroyed.
Here in Tulsa, we have had some difficult times from time to time. We've overcome them.
In true Tulsa fashion, the Greenwood area would rebound. It is now home to new businesses, the Greenwood Cultural Center, OSU Tulsa, One Oak Field, and the John Hope Reconciliation Park, and replicas of buildings that once stood tall. Leaders hope this site that sits in the middle of it all can be the next big rebound for the city.
Having a partner like the federal government in a project like this, I think is not only critical but essential for its redevelopment. I hope they take away, most importantly, the opportunity for community redevelopment that these brownfields present.
The old Dover Norris Sucker Rod plant is boarded up and begging for change. While a wrecking company uses it to store cars, the city hopes to buy it and use it for a juvenile detention center. The adult correctional facility sits just next door. Like all brownfield sites, it has its share of environmental issues, but so did this site until a success story turned it around. Through a federal, state, and private partnership, Brainerd Chemical is going strong, providing jobs and chemicals on a site that used to be labeled a brownfield site.
You get a renewed sense of pride to see an old site that was once abandoned and had deteriorated being redeveloped. So you know it can be done.
The third main area of interest is Morton Hospital, an empty North Tulsa site that some describe as a state of emergency.
They won't ever be able to say that I didn't try.
Julius Begee says his birthplace is in need of help. The original building that dates back to 1921 was a thriving African-American exclusive hospital. All that's left now is a flooded basement, broken glass, and makeshift homes for those who have nowhere to live. Vandals and thieves have helped themselves to copper wiring and have made it impossible to consistently illuminate it at night. There is hope for development on Tulsa's current and potential brownfields sites. Tulsans are backing the possible federal partnership to help clean them up each and every step of the way.
And they're willing to come together and move forward. And that's what life is all about.
Mayor, that was very well done. The mayor of Tulsa took the reins of the city government during a time of financial crisis resulting from the national recession. His commitment to public safety, economic development, sustainability, and the quality of life issues demonstrates his heart and vision for Tulsa to improve the quality of life for all Tulsans. I've had the privilege of introducing Mayor Bartlett. I've got to know him the last few years, and it's been my honor and privilege to get to know him better. Please welcome the Mayor, Honorable Dewey Butler.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that video. It was done by a person that's on our staff, a lady named Beth Hawkins. And we told her that we wanted to show something. We had a meeting, it was the second meeting of our Brownfields public outreach, and we had several people there from the EPA, from the Brownfields program. Charlie Bartsch, he was there. But we introduced this video because we wanted to show the commitment that we have as a city to brownfields, but we also wanted to show the commitment we have of our history. I mean, most people would not want to show a race riot. That was the absolute worst type of activity in this country's history that was done in 1921 that we still get reminded of occasionally. But we recognize it. I won't say we embrace it, but we certainly acknowledge it as a significant part of our history and as a stepping stone, using brownfields as the catapult to put it behind us, to put it in a place where we recognize it, we remember it, but we also put it in a place where we can now proudly say we are progressing beyond the mistakes of our past. Not erasing them, but progressing. So that's why we had the video put together, and that's why we show it. And we think it's something that we all should do. We all try to put a Chamber of Commerce view on most of our perceptions of our city, and which some of this was, the video. But it shows that we're realistic, and we see brownfields as a huge opportunity. When I became mayor 2.5 years ago, I didn't have a clue what brownfields was, much less what it gave to a community. But when I talked to several of our employees, and they told me what brownfields was about, and I went to the conference in Philadelphia, and I heard everybody speak of brownfields. I met Matthew, and I met Charlie, and we talked, and we found out what a great opportunity Brownfields is. So we are embracing it, and we recognize it's a terrific path of progression in our community. And several things, in my view, have brought it into play and really shows how it does work. It's very good politically, it's very good economically, it's very good for the community. Politically, I found out several interesting things. First of all, it gave us a great opportunity of collaboration. Too many times we see government programs and we just dismiss them. We just think, well, it's just something that's not going to work anyway. And there's no communication, and that's kind of the end of the discussion. But we have found that Brownfields is the real deal, that it really does show that government wants to help and government works. And when we walk in the door and we are able to talk about a collaboration with Brownfields, with the EPA, with the other departments of the EPA, with the Department of Energy, with the Department of Transportation, with the White House, with all the different types of government that too often are the old proverbial silo that we see. But when we walk in and we say that we have an opportunity with Brownfields, but we're looking for you, the Department of Transportation, to be involved with this whole project. And they get excited, and they really see how committed we are as a government and how committed the Brownfields program is to revitalize and reinvest and reinvigorate a city, a downtown area, a community, a group of people, and it works. The encouragement that Brownfields gives just in that collaborative process is so good, first of all, for self-confidence. It's good for the community spirit, and it's good for the Brownfields program itself because it really does work. Economically, obviously we all know this, but it gives the ability of a project, a piece of property that's pretty much useless, gets it back into play, gets it to where it regains value, not just economic value, which is very important. It begins to develop an opportunity to pay taxes to the community, supporting schools, projects, whatever that might be. But it also invigorates a very strong sense of self-confidence with that community. It's given me an opportunity, for example, again, to embrace our past, but also to show a community that we mean business when we say that we're going to revitalize this part of town. That particular part of town where the race riot occurred literally was ground zero for that race riot, where a large number of people were beat to death, killed, terrible things happened, their businesses burned up, destroyed, families destroyed, several bad things happened. And it remained a memory in Tulsa's spirit, and it was not a good memory, and it really did stop a lot of progress. But now, when we go back and we say, this is what we're going to do, we can show that we're going to do it. And we can now, people believe us when we say that we mean business, we mean Brownfields, and we mean reinvestment, and we mean it when we say that this community is once again going to regain its self-confidence and its self-esteem and its purpose of being a part of the Tulsa community. Brownfields. We started the process with what Cameron and his company helped us get started. We've now had 4 public meetings. When we've had public meetings like this in the past in that area, we might get 5 people show up, and probably 4 of them were paid to be there. So, didn't really accomplish much. Made 4 people miss their evening meal, but it didn't accomplish much. But now what we're doing is we're getting the public involved. Every meeting that we've had has anywhere from 150 to 400 people, private citizens, involved in that meeting. That was a big time change. And that has led to this. As an example, we started doing something, we in the mayor's office came up with an idea we called, let's take City Hall to the neighborhoods. So we have 9 city council districts, and we started having about every couple of weeks a meeting in the evening where we would bring City Hall departments and department heads into a particular city council district. And when we did that, in the past, again, we just have a few people, and suddenly, the very first one we did was in this Brownfields area where the race riot occurred. We had 400 people there, and boy, were they invigorated. They were involved, and they got up and they spoke loudly and forcefully, and we listened. The public listened, and because they have now been given an opportunity to express their points of view, because they now feel there's a sense of self-confidence that they really do matter. And I go back to it again, it's because of the Brownfields. It's because we got started, purposely started, getting the public involved in an issue, and we showed them that we could actually do it. So, that process, we've now selected 8 different sites. 2 of them have started a process. They're in this area. You saw several of them in the video. But that's going to lead to a lot of significant things, again, somewhat related. One of the big economic development projects that we're pushing is an intermodal project on the northeast side of Tulsa, on the immediate east side of our airport, which is about 4 or 5 miles away from the race riot area. And part of that, an intermodal project is a simple, well, it's easy to describe, but it's very expensive to put together, but it's a coordinated method of coordinating all major forms of transportation. Airport with, we have a Port of Catoosa on the east side of Tulsa, with a port, with railroads, with expressways, et cetera. We coordinate it all together. Well, part of the Brownfields project that we're seeing is that we're going to have an opportunity at some point in the future to relocate a series of railroad lines that are used to store hazardous materials on railroad tracks. And it's right next to Oklahoma State University's campus in Tulsa. It's the last thing you want to have next to a college campus is a bunch of railroad cars storing hazardous material that, if it were to blow up or start leaking, it would cause a huge problem. Brownfields program is going to give us an opportunity to relocate those railroad lines several miles east to our intermodal project. It's out in the country, it's isolated, and it's controlled. That will open up a very large area next to the Evans Fin Tube location, a very large area for some very serious economic development. And the Brownfields program has given us that opportunity. I cannot speak more highly of what it has done for our city and what it continues to do, economically, politically, but socially. And again, the self-confidence that it gives our city, that it's given a community that heretofore has been ignored, that value is immeasurable. And we are so grateful, so grateful. I'm speaking to you as a mayor that has seen it up close in person and seen the significance of what it can do. So from the bottom of my collective heart, thank you very much for all the good work. Lloyd Kirk helped me get involved with this whole story when we were in Philadelphia and introduced me to some people that explained it to me. We have a great group of people in Tulsa. We have seen Oklahoma City. They've had a tremendous success in this, and so we're trying to simply implement them one more time. So Lloyd, again, thank you very much, and thank you for asking me to speak, and keep up your good works. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Cameron. Let's give him another round of applause. You know, Tulsa's being led by Mayor Bartlett and reinvesting in itself through Brownfields redevelopment, and I appreciate those words by both of you. You know, when you have 250 people come to these public meetings, which he's had, and we've been to those public meetings, you know, he's going to listen to the people. like he was talking about. And it's neat going to these meetings, and these people are speaking from their heart, like the mayor said. And so, Mayor, my hat's off to you and EFG for those public meetings that you're holding, and they're great for the city of Tulsa. This afternoon we have 3 sessions, one at 1:30, one at 2:45, and then at 4 p.m. back in here for our end-note speaker, which will be talking about reinventing Brownfield law. So, see you later this afternoon.